Yes, we'll just go ahead. Babajide Ogunsomo joins us now. He's a data and information analyst to shed some light on this. Well, let's start. I mean, yes, you've gone through this because INEC did circulate that bulletin of theirs, which was talking about why or the basis for this. You've gone through this. What did you find?
Thank you. The first problem we have is there are three problems. The first is INEC wants to increase the number of polling units, which is the first problem. The second problem is that the political parties want to see how INEC will allocate the polling units. The third problem is from the citizens. The citizens are more concerned about how close are the polling units to their houses and where these polling units will be concentrated. To understand where we are today, we have to understand the current structure of the polling units in the country and then understand what INEC has done. So currently what you have is INEC's voters database of about 71 million numbers. So 71 million voters is spread over about 119,000 polling units. So on one hand, INEC wants to do a good thing by increasing its number of polling units from 119,000 to 150,000. Now, although there's a question that comes about this, and that is, on what basis did INEC choose 150,000 polling units? Why not 170,000? Why not 200,000? But let's not even worry about the number of polling units INEC has chosen to have across the country. So INEC says, let's move from 119,000 to 150,000.
No, I think that is already solved. They say that it's based on the standard 500 voters per polling unit recommended internationally.
Yeah, but
doesn't
the challenge,
that quite answer the question?
That doesn't fully answer the question, and I'll explain why. What INEC has really done, or what INEC wants to do, is to look at what what's each state's share on the voters database compared to the rest of other states. So I'll give you an example. Ogun State, based on INEC's voters database, has about 1.79 million voters on Ogun State's database, which translates to about 2.5% of voters across the country. So in essence, INEC then says, if we want to have 150,000 polling units across the country, it only seems fair for us to say, since Ogun State has 2.5% of voters, let Ogun State also have 2.5% of 150,000 polling units. Now, once you work that out, what you find out is INEC is suggesting that Ogun State, for example, should have 3,828 polling units, which seems to be reasonable. Mm-hmm. Presently, Ogun State has only about 3,213 polling units. So what INEC is saying in essence that, okay, Ogun State currently has 3,213. Let's increase it based on the allocation of voters in Ogun State, which is a reasonable logic. But the challenge is, if you take a state like Anambra, which has quite similar number of voters on its database to Ogun State, which has Anambra has about 1.78 million voters on the database with INEC. Using the same analogy, what INEC is saying is, ordinarily, Anambra shouldn't have so much more above 3,000 polling units. However, as of today, Anambra has 4,608 polling units.
Why is that?
Because of how the polling units had been previously allocated. So INEC has realized that if it's going to go by the sheer distribution of voters based on its database, it's going to be forced to give some states more polling units. And it's going to be forced to withdraw some polling units from some states based on how it was previously.
But isn't that what we've seen already?
But that's not quite what we've seen, because what will then happen is if INEC does attempt to take out polling units from some states, it will be equal to electoral suicide, because most states wouldn't. In fact, there are about 5 states that INEC has come out to say have excess polling units.
Okay, pardon me. Let me jump in there, and I hope you hold your thought so you can come back to it after I raise this question and you make the point. Speaking about Anambra, which you talked about, yes, they've got that total registered voters of 1,784,536, and I'm just wondering because if you look at the 2006 population figure for the state, they've got I beg your pardon, I said 1,000. That's a million. They've got 4,177,828. Now I'm wondering, if the total registered voters here is that low, a little over a million, does that take into cognizance from what you've seen about the potential of more people registering? So if they allocate those PUs based on the total number of people registered, is that not going to be a problem in the future if you have 2 times more people who eventually come up and register? Because if we're doing the continuous voter registration exercise now, do they factor that in with this PU distribution or reallocation?
They do, but let's make it a bit simpler. Historically, there are 13 states that hold about 50% of Nigeria's population. Historically as well, these 13 states hold about 50% of the polling units. You have Lagos, Kano, Kaduna, Katsina, Anambra is included, Delta, Borno, and you also have Sokoto right now in that list. So we have 13 states in the country that account for 50% of the population. And historically as well, these 13 states hold about 50% of polling units. With this current INEC polling unit distribution, a state like Borno, that previously was ranked number 9th in terms of states that have the highest polling units in the country, that's polling unit concentration, when you look at the share of polling units in Borno State across all other states. Borno was ranked 9th prior to this new exercise. Mm-hmm. Currently, after this new exercise, Borno now has moved up to 6th position. The question is, how come and why should Borno move from 9th to 6th? Especially considering the emigration circumstances that we have in Borno. Currently, Borno State has more polling units than Rivers State, has more polling units than Anambra State, has more polling units than Bauchi State. Before this new polling unit distribution, that was not the case. The case was, yes, Borno State was among the top 13 states when it comes to polling unit concentration. But what we have today is the polling unit of Borno has moved from 9th to 6th.